So I got the house together. It looks great. And because I'm not putting doors on the front, I decided to make some nice French windows. And I assembled them with the domino, and I made them a little bit bigger than I needed to. I wanted the windows to have like a French window style, so I routed the bottom, both the horizontal and the vertical pieces, right through the center. And then I ripped up some small half ply to fit into those routes because I wanted to give it a look like four window panes. So I had to make a cross to fit in the cutout that I made in the window, and I wanted to join the cross together flush. So I cut through the center of it half the thickness of the wood, and I did that to both pieces, and kind of snapped them right over each other so that when they snap together they fit flush. And once I got that assembled, I put a little glue into the cutouts that I made in the window frames, and then laid those two pieces down, snapping it all together and shooting it with the brad nailer. And even those pieces I made a little bit bigger than the window because, like I said, I made the window a little bigger than the window opening, and then I would trim them to the perfect size so that I had really nice reveals. Once I got the windows done, I decided I was going to make some planter boxes. So I ripped up some 3/4 birch and I mitered it. And I basically made um, a face and two sides and then a bottom. And to fit the bottom in, I cut a rabbet into the bottom of all my sides and my face before I assembled it. And to assemble it, I used tape to clamp it. I laid all the pieces out, laid them flat, outside facing up, and then I put the masking tape on it. And then once you got the tape on it, you can kind of flip it around and put the glue on it, and it'll stay together. It won't fall apart. And then I grab a square, and you can clamp it up, or you can just shoot it right there. But when you're done, you peel the tape off, and it really makes a nice miter. It's a nice technique to use for smaller projects if you want to try and get a tight miter. So I took 1/4 inch plywood once I got the planter boxes, kind of the frame together, and I just nailed it onto the bottom. And then they were done, and I decided, okay, now I got to add a molding. So I chose a 1/8 inch bead molding, and I grabbed my router and a piece of wood that I had laying around, and then I hit all four edges of the wood. That way I would have enough molding to do the both planter boxes. Once I got it all milled up, I mitered it and attached it with the brad nailer to the top of the planter boxes the way you see here. But it still looked a little dull, a little plain, so I decided that I was going to rip up another piece of 3/4 and give the bottom some more detail. So I made it a little bit bigger than the planter box, and I used the same bit, which is an OG bit, in the router to give the edge a nice decorative look. It's the same bit that I used on the windowsills. So once I got the planter boxes together and I was happy with them, I started filling all the nail holes. And the same thing with the window. Filled all the nail holes, and I started to sand them up. I figured, let me tackle the small stuff before I went ahead and actually hit the house. And the thing about sanding, I'm using the Festool vacuum system, which is nice because there's not a lot of dust, and it's a nice machine. But the thing about sanding, the reason why I'm showing you all this is because you really want to see the process. You want to know it takes a lot. You got to sand everything smooth, and then you hit it again. You break all your edges with a little sandpaper, and it's a little bit of work, but it's the detail that you have. It's the part of the project that you have to do if you really want a nice finished product. Um, After that, I went and attacked the box, and my son actually came in the shop and helped me out with filling the nail holes. I told him this was a gift for his sister, and he was really excited. And he put it on a little thick, but he did get all the nail holes, and that was nice. After I got the box sanded up, I just went back and grabbed the smaller things again and figured I would just get them ready for priming. So took the air hose, blew all the dust off, and one of the things I picked up, which is nice, is when you work with a lot of different trades, you learn tips. And working with painters, I found that some of the painters like to use spray primer for smaller projects, or maybe intricate moldings where it's a little pain to get your brush in. Sometimes I watch them just walk up to a casing that they need to hit really quick, or a piece of crown molding, and they'll just spray prime it, and it really makes a nice finish. So that's one of the tricks that I picked up. For instance, these windows here, if I were to use my brush to paint the little mullions, all the sides and the top, it would have taken forever. So the spray primer is a nice little trick, and it got good to me. So in this portion where I would probably be using a brush to cut the primer in the inside corners and cut in around the casings of the window and the door, I decided to use the spray primer as well. And once I got all three pieces all cut in, then I poured some paint in a tray and broke out the roller. And I'm using a 3/8 snap roller, which it gets the primer onto the wood good, but it's not one of those things that it's really heavy, and it's not half inch and it's not quarter. 3/8 is kind of right in the middle. It's the thickness of the fiber of the roller. And a 3/8 I'm comfortable with using that one to get a nice amount of paint on without putting too much and without having to constantly dip the roller back into the paint tray, or primer tray in this instance. And the thing about rolling on primer, or paint for that matter, is it's something you have to do a few times before you get used to it. But you don't want to put too much pressure while you're rolling out the primer, because it will make lines. You kind of want to just give it and let the roller do its work. It rolls like a little wheel. You just got to put a little bit of pressure, make sure you got the right amount of paint on there, and it's something you just get used to, but it goes pretty smooth. And as far as the lines go, it really doesn't matter with primer anyway, because you're going to sand everything down that you put primer on before you do your next step, which is paint. So here again, I'm using the palm sander, the Festool vacuum system. It's not a lot of dust, and I'm basically just wiping down everything with the sander wherever I can fit it. And you want to remember to just feel it after you sand it. Kind of sand an area and then rub it with your hand, which is really your most important tool that you'll ever use, because you can do so many things with it. But you get to touch it and you feel an area that you've done, and it lets you know that you're ready to move on to the next step. And for me, the next step was to hit the small nooks and crannies again. And I'm using a foam sponge sanding block, and it feels like a sponge in your hand. You can squeeze it and it contorts and bends to the shapes of different moldings and stuff like that. But the texture of it is like sandpaper, and they sell it in a few different grits. You can get it fine, medium, and coarse, and it's a great tool for hitting flat surfaces, for hitting moldings and odd shapes, because it'll bend to any shape that you use. And again, I just went over the whole project, and after I hit everything with the palm sander, I came back with a little sanding block and just worked it in all the nooks and crannies and little areas where I couldn't fit the big palm sander. And you take your time, and you turn your brain off and you think about it, and you just sand and you get it done, and make sure you're happy with that, because the next step is paint, and you want to make sure you take your time and get it done right. So that'll be the next step for me. I hope you enjoyed this process and this part of the video, and next up is paint.